Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on weird and true mysterious stories, from glitches to the paranormal. Would you like even more content? Here's my Patreon. Now onto the stories. Case file number 1290, written by MintakanRainbow. My father Tracey, the Lord of Rain. This happened in 2008, shortly after my 17th birthday. My dad and I were best friends. We supported each other through a lot, and we just emotionally understood each other. He used to tell me, "I can read your face and body language like a book. You can't hide secrets from me." And he was right. He always knew when I was upset, even if I put on my best thespian act. We used to talk about everything, from science to religion. He was a devout Christian. I told him one day, "When you get to heaven, you'll have to let me know if it's there or not." He laughed and said he'd make it rain in Tucson for a straight week. A week after my 17th birthday, he suffered a massive heart attack and passed away. I still tear up over a decade later. I miss him so much. The night before he passed away, my brother, father, and I piled into the car to go see a Friday night movie. My dad had tossed me the keys to practice my driving more, so I obliged and pulled out of the driveway and made my way towards the stop sign, exiting our neighborhood. At the stop sign, he said, "You know what? I'm not feeling very well. Can you take me home and you two can go see the movie?" To this day, I can't rationalize why I said these words. "Do you want me to take you to the hospital?" He said no, and turning the car around when the pit of my stomach knew something was wrong is one of my biggest regrets. As he walked inside, I called out, "Drink some water. I love you." So at the least, I keep in my heart the last words we ever said to each other was that we loved each other. He passed away 12 hours later. He had been feeling the start of the attack. The story continues. The next night, after we spent all day in the hospital with his body, stroking his hair and telling him we loved him and such, we were all emotionally drained. My mother, parents were divorced, drove from California that day to Arizona to be with us, and got a hotel room. My brother and mother had fallen asleep. I could hear their rhythmic breathing. I was sharing a bed with my mom, and there was maybe a foot gap between the hotel bed and the wall that separated me from the bathroom. I was replaying the events of the last 24 hours over and over in my head. What could I have done differently? How did I know something was wrong? Why didn't I just drive him to the hospital like my gut told me to? As I asked myself these questions, the room suddenly filled up. All available floor space was taken by a person standing, but they were all black shadows, no features. I wasn't afraid of them though. They felt familiar. Then I smelled it. His Sunday church cologne, only used to approach God's house. Now, I'm not religious like he was, but I respected his religious beliefs. Then I felt the warmth in that little foot space between me and the wall. I looked over and I saw another outline, but this one was red. I'll never forget that red. It was the purest red I've ever seen. It smelled like him. It felt like him. It was familiar. So I whispered as to not wake my mother and brother. "I love you too, Dad. I'll be okay. Go with them." I felt what felt like a forehead kiss, and then the room was empty again, just as quickly as it filled. Whole event lasted a few seconds. For the rest of the week, it rained in Tucson for a solid week. But the story still doesn't end there. Fast forward to his funeral. Now I want to give a quick history lesson as this is important. In ancient Greece, when someone died, they would place coins on the deceased eyelids to pay for their transport across the river Styx. My father and I had many conversations about Greek mythology, and now I'm a Hellenic pagan. Service is over. We placed his ashes in the ground and buried them in the cemetery. Then the family sat in a circle and shared their favorite memories of him. My uncle gave a wacky childhood story. My step-sibling said how they had both recently found 2 stacked pennies in weird locations right in front of them. Like my step-sis worked at a vet's office as a receptionist, and she looked away and looked back and they were just there. I admit I was jealous at the time. I talked about the thing I had already missed. the jingle of his keys that he hung on one of his belt loops. Every day he came home from work, I heard his keys first, and would get up and greet him with a hug and ask about his day, and tell him about school. Sometimes he'd help with homework, or we'd make dinner together. When everyone was packing up, I laid on the ground next to his temporary tombstone and just, pondered on life and death, memories of my dad. Mostly, what I think I was doing was feeling pain and letting it seep into the ground. Finally, my brother came over to me, gently rubbed my back, and said it was time to go. He left me to collect myself, and as I started to push myself up, I looked down and right under where my head had been, there were 2 stacked pennies. They weren't there when I laid down, so I left them there, next to his tombstone, just in case he needed them. There are more stories. My father has continued to visit me every so often, mostly in the middle of the night. It wakes me up by starting with his cologne. I do not buy it, keep it near me, nor have anything with the scent. I don't because it hurts and reminds me too much of him. Then a corner of the room darkens, and I feel like I'm not alone. Sometimes it's scary and unsettling until I smell it. Then I talk to him, tell him what's going on. Then the darkness suddenly will dissipate and the smell will vanish and I'll feel alone again. A lot of this is unexplained, especially if you don't believe in the afterlife. A lot of it scared me for a long time and I still can't explain the question I asked him. I can't explain his cologne coming and going within minutes in the middle of the night, and I can't explain the pennies and how they got there so quickly. And yeah, this is the story of my dad, Tracey, the man who made it rain for an entire week in Tucson in 2008. Case notes file 1290. My father Tracey, the Lord of Rain. Every now and then you get stories like this, so packed with emotion that it's hard not to tear up when reading them. I'm so sorry for your loss, Rainbow, even though it's been a decade. There's so much beauty in this though, isn't there? And knowledge to be gleaned. There's an afterlife of sorts. We aren't privy to the precise details, only to serve as evidence that whatever animates our bodies transcends the physical universe. He was appearing to you as this red purity and shadow, and of course with his cologne and everything. And I do contemplate this mixed with quantum immortality. There may be a moment after our death in one universe where we're presented with a choice: continue the game in another us, or reset entirely. Maybe go into a kind of observer mode with limited interaction potential. In your case, more than enough to prove the existence beyond this mortal plane. Your father truly is the master of rain. And now time for the quote of the day. The best way to predict the future is to invent it. Alan Kay. Reminds me of the Apple CEO from the past, Steve Jobs. His mindset was to create a new product that people didn't even know they wanted until they had it. In that sense, it's a way to predict the future by simply building it yourself. Obviously hard to do, but it is a way to do it, or now more modern times with Elon Musk, where, well yeah, he's a controversial figure, but you can't deny that he's accomplishing pretty amazing things. And especially if he actually manages to go to Mars with real human astronauts, that would be out of this world, quite literally. I hope he is able to predict the future by building it. I really want my own spaceship at some point. By the way, if you haven't seen it, watch The Expanse. It's a fantastic TV show series based on book series, and the books I haven't read, but I hear they're great. But the show is fantastic. The sets, the actors, they have great chemistry together, and the science is extremely accurate for a TV show. You don't usually see that, where you have a ship that can spin on its own axis while in space and moving very fast, and then to alter your vector, you have to burn as they call it. You have to activate your ship's drive and actually eject mass in the direction counter to where you want to go. Push it, go the other way. Newton is all up in that. And also gravity, you have spin gravity and also just acceleration from the ship itself. There's no like gravity plating or anything like that, like you get in most TV shows. Plenty of other details, but I just love hard science in TV shows because it gives you a glimpse of what really could be. I don't want to spoil anything. There's some things in the show that probably aren't realistic, but almost everything you see could happen. And a couple centuries from now, we might actually be out there on Mars and the moon and in the asteroid belt, mining the asteroid belt. I think it'll happen. Maybe even sooner than that. Like the video, subscribe, hit the bell. Kinetic Symphony signing off.